Cushing, host of Carolina Hoofbeats TV, and today our guest is Johnny Cook. And Johnny was a recent competitor in our Everything Equine Expo Colt starting. So Johnny, tell us a little bit about how that experience was. How did you choose which horse you hoped you drew?
You know, we had a really good time, and I drew fifth. Of all the competitors, I got to draw fifth. TJ was sixth, and there was three horses left in drawing fifth. The horse that TJ drew had a little spot in his eye, and so I steered clear of him because I felt like that would be a problem to get past in that short amount of time. And then the other horse that was available was a 5-year-old running bred mare, whereas the rest of the horses were 3-year-olds. And I just felt like that last 3-year-old filly was going to be the best bet in the allotted time that we would have, you know.
Right.
Not saying that 5-year-old wouldn't make a good horse, but for the time, that period that we had, I thought that the 3-year-old would be my best bet.
And for the folks out there watching, what we do at our Colt starting is it's over a period of 3 days. But the Colt starters get a 1-hour session in the Friday morning and Friday afternoon, Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon, and then Sunday morning, and then it's finale time. So, you know, we have to give the babies time to rest between their learning experiences, but it isn't a lot of time.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's a lot to go, but they can, if done correctly, they can endure it. But it is a lot to take place there in a 3-day period. And as long as you keep it more about the process instead of about a race,
yep,
then you still get the good things done that they need done.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I can say, you know, all of the Colt starters that we've had at any of our events, I always make sure that I choose people that I know are going to put the horse first.
Yes, ma'am. We appreciate that. And it was good competing with everyone. And like I said, the girl that won, Sarah Chastain, me and you had talked about her prior to her coming up there. And I felt like she was a super good hand, and I see the things that she gets done at home, and I felt like it would just translate real well into that process.
I know. I mean, just, you know, I had never heard of her, so I was so glad that you recommended her because out of nowhere she came in and won.
And I'll tell you, that little horse that she drew was just remarkable. Just remarkable. I mean, every one of us said on day one, there's your winner. You could just look at that little horse and see the things that you know that she was getting done and how smooth and everything that horse took it.
It does make a difference, you know, the horse's personality. Charlie does a good job at kind of matching them up and making them as fair as he can. But, you know, sometimes, like the horse TJ drew, there's a couple of little glitches, and it makes it a really tough horse to work with.
It really does. It really does.
So tell me.
But I felt like the little filly I drew, she did a really good job. She did a really good job, and I think, you know, in my round with the other two competitors, I was the first one to have her caught, and never, ever had to rope her one time. After I got her caught, and after we had initial handling, every time we went back into that pen, she turned and faced and come straight to me every trip. So
tell us more about round one and what and all you did.
Well, round one, the first thing you got to do, you've got to get her to moving her feet. And then once you get her moving her feet, then you control the direction that she moves her feet, when she moves them, and how fast she moves them. Once you do that, you can start capturing that eye and drawing her to you just a little bit. And once I had her drawing to me, and like that was probably less than a 9-minute process. Once I had her drawing to me, it wasn't very long before I could rub all over and then stick a halter on her. Once we get that halter on her, we're going to go back to moving her feet, but then we get to add a little bit of feel to it. We're able to ask for her face and kind of control the direction of her feet but more so with an ask of pressure than her just running.
Right.
We got those things done and had her in her hand. I tell folks all the time with those babies, underestimate the power of a brush or the power of your hands on them. It doesn't have to be 100% work. Like you said, it's a big weekend for those babies, and so when you have the opportunity to stop and rub on them and brush on them and love on them, but put some feel in those hands and spend that time rubbing and brushing and things like that, you can get them just as broke with those hands as you can flagging her around or tarping her around or shaking her around or chasing her around, because you build confidence in everything that you do. You're building confidence. And like I said, I know that the Pirelli saying is put your heart in your hands and touch them with your heart. But honestly, if you'll put some feel in those hands and you'll spend the time with those hands, touching them and rubbing them and bending them, you can get so much done right there on the ground just with that handwork. And on it, I told the judges I was laughing, and I cut up. Lord, you know I cut up.
Yeah.
But I told the judges after that first round, after just rubbing all over, and time was about up, I said, she's broke. She's broke, you know. But I had touched her everywhere that I needed to touch her and had her bending softly and things like that. So I felt like we had a really good first round.
Absolutely. Now, you've never been on my show before, so tell the viewers a little bit about you and your horse experience.
Yes, ma'am. I live in Bremen, Georgia, and we run the Rock and Sea Colt Company. I've been in the horse industry for 35 years. I'm 51 years old this year and been in the horse industry for 35 years. My wife and my family, we start close to 100 horses a year, and I'll sell about 250 to 300 horses a year. Horses have been a way of life for us for a long, long time. And, you know, I tell folks, a lot of people ask me how I got started starting colts, and I tell them that my dad, when I was a young boy, my daddy would go to the sale and buy a colt and bring him home, and I'd get him started, and as soon as I got him riding good, Daddy would sell it.
Yeah.
And so I learned real fast that if I wanted to have a good horse, I had to learn how to get him that way. I had to learn how to make him that way, you know. And so it was a process as a kid, and when I was a young boy, people didn't tell you anything. Like nowadays, it's a world of information, and everybody's shareaholics, and they'll tell you know, you can get all the information you want out there.
Yeah.
But back then, folks didn't tell you. But there was a clinician named John Lyons, and you know him. John Lyons come on the scene, and he had a 6 VHS set called Round Penning for Reasoning. And there was a local feed store that had that 6 VHS set, and at the time, that thing was $199. And that was a lot of money to me as a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah.
But I wanted the information that was in those videotapes, that was in those cassettes. So I cut grass at the feed store all summer long to get what was in those VHS sets for that VHS set. And just got so much out of it, and the information and the way that his analogies and the way that he explained things and articulated things, I just become a student then, because then I realized there was information out there, and there was other ways of doing things and smarter ways and things like that. But yes, ma'am, been a student of the horse my whole life, and really enjoy what we do.
Well, you certainly have some magnificent horses that I see for sale on your social media sites. You tempted me a few times, and I've come close, but when Rod got sick, I got rid of all my horses, and so I've been debating whether or not I needed more horses at this point in my life. I'm getting old now to have them, but I sure miss them.
Lord, I understand, and you always need more horses. The answer to that is always yes, Miss Rose. You always need
Johnny,
more.
At one point in my life, I had 50 head because I wanted to hear them when they ran across the field. I wanted to hear their hoof beats.
How about that? That is something else.
Yeah, my husband spoils me. He ain't got no sense, but thank God for that.
That's right.
So
Yes, ma'am.
tell me a little bit about round 2. How did that go for you?
You know what? I really felt like, again, like I said in the beginning, I think that colt starting and the competitions and things like that are definitely more about the process to me than a race or than a competition, because I think that if you follow the process, then all of that comes together. It's just like baking a cake. You can't put the icing on before you put the eggs in.
Yep.
And so our second round, again, like I said, when I walked into the ring, my feelings come straight to me, which was reassuring because I didn't have to rope her, I didn't have to chase her, I didn't have to spend that time round pinning her to get her back in my hands. When I entered the pen, she was already back in my hands, and I got her haltered up and just brushed her from her ears to her toes, and like I said, built confidence that way. When we went on into saddling her, I am a believer that if you've got them prepared for the saddle, if you did all the preparation work and you've got her prepared for the saddle and you get her saddled up, when I ask one to step off that first time after being saddled, I never drive them off or run them off. I will just ask them to step off. If they go off at the walk, I love it. That's what I want. If they go off at the trot, that's their decision, and I dang sure don't want them blowing up and going off. But in my round 1 work, I've built me in a shutdown, and what I mean by that is that I can look at that hip and make her hip step away from me, and it'll bring her front end toward me, and it works just like a one-range stop. So it shuts them down. So if I ask one to step around at the walk, and then we'll build it up to the trot, and say that it scares her just a little bit at a trot, and she might hump a time or two, I can drive that hip away from me just by looking at it, using body language. Horses are masters of body language, and I can look at that old hip and make it go away, and her front end come to me, and it kind of shuts down any buck or hump that they might have. But with that being said, she never did. She never did buck or hump like that. When I let her go off, I just let her go off at her pace, and we did that for a few minutes, and then we kind of picked up the speed and added a little more pressure, and we just built it up slowly. But before long, I was able to mount her, and she did great with it. Stood like an oak tree for saddling and everything. She stood like an oak tree, but I had already built in somewhat of a steering wheel by doing all my bending and flexing and everything on the ground. And I tell folks all the time, if I don't have control of her face, then I have no business being on her back. And so before we ever got to that point of stepping onto her back, I'm going to make sure that I've got her bending and giving and guiding and just following the feel of my hands. And you can do every bit of that on that ground as if you were in the saddle. And so every bit of that then translates into that saddle. And when you step up there and you pick her little face up and ask her to step off to the left, well, it's like she's been doing it her whole life, because that's what you've spent the last, 2 days building, or 2 sessions building up to.
Right. And so did you ride her in round 2?
I did, yes, ma'am. We walked, trot, and cantered in round 2, and I did not camp out on her in round 2. Matter of fact, I didn't camp out on her a lot in most of the rounds. And what I mean by camp out on her is I didn't spend the whole hour riding on her back, because I could do so much on the ground with her, getting those things installed. But yes, we did ride in round 2. We walked, trot, cantered, and after I got my canter, I stepped back off of her and rewarded her, because I felt like she'd give me everything that I'd asked her to do.
Now, that was the end of the first day, so tell us about Saturday would be round 3.
Yes, ma'am. Round 3. I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. I asked the judges what they thought, and at the end of that deal, and they told me, they said, well, we felt like you just kind of took a couple of rounds off. But the truth was that in my process, I felt like we were where we needed to be, and there wasn't any sense in me banging on her. When I went in the pen on day 2, which was round 3, again, she come straight to me. I knew that I could ride her. I had already rode her in round 2. I knew that we could ride, no problem. And so I spent, again, time on the ground, picking up her feet, making sure that I could handle all of her feet, getting, just reaffirming that bending and that control and that guide, and being able to ask her I want my colts to just learn how to say yes. So just learn how to say yes. When I step up there and I put them in my hands, I heard a friend say one time, a ballerina said that riding was much like ballerina dancing. From the hips down is the machine. From the hips down is the machine, but from the hands are the poetry.
Absolutely.
And so, and so when you're riding, of course, you're doing all the machine, you're doing all the pedaling, you're doing all the work from your hips down, keeping them going. But the smoothness and the quietness of those hands is the poetry. And so when you're able to ask for that face and nobody saw it, and that little filly just bends and gives her face with a quiet feel, that's what you're looking for. That's what you're looking for. I love to ride those babies, and sometimes even at home say, you didn't see that, did you? You didn't see that, did you? Because you could ask so subtly. Again, they can feel a fly land on their tail.
Yeah.
And so they can definitely feel you when you're on their back, or when you're sawing in their mouth, or any of that good stuff. People say, oh, he's hard mouth. No, he's not hard mouth. You just don't know when to release, or when to reward, or any of that good stuff. And so we spent a lot of time, I mean a ton of time, in round 3, just doing those riding her from the ground. Because like we said, it's a big 3 days. They had come out of snow country, like West Tennessee had a lot of snow this past winter.
Mm-hmm.
And they come out of snow country, and then they come into that arena that was heated, and going into that type of work environment. And so I just felt like the best thing that I could do for her was to spend that time on the ground educating her, but allowing her the opportunity to breathe. And then, like the last 10 minutes of that round 3, stepped over on her back again, did some guiding around, walk, trot, canter, got all that took care of again with her, stepped off and rewarded her, and again, just put so much work into that groundwork. And she absorbed everything, and she took everything. So yes, ma'am, I felt like we just did phenomenal.
Oh, I think so too. Now, that was the end of the first day. So tell us about Saturday would be round 3.
Yes, ma'am, round 3. I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. I asked the judges what they thought, and at the end of that deal, and they told me, they said, well, we felt like you just kind of took a couple of rounds off. We put our heart into it, and it's important to us.
And that shows, Johnny, you're an amazing horseman. There's no question about that. I never hesitate asking you to come, because your display of sportsmanship and horsemanship is extraordinary, and I'm always proud to have you there.
I sure appreciate that.
Now tell me about the finale.
Okay, now on the finale, we got to come in, catch our horse, saddle it. Whether we ride them in the round pen or whatever, that's our choice. But then we've got to take them outside, in front of the judges there. And if we're on them, we have to dismount, pick up all 4 feet, and then, mount back up. And so I feel like that when you go into that round pen for that finale, I think you need to be judged from second one. The minute you crack that gate, and again, she comes straight to me, brushed her from her head to her toes. I want to say she's one of the best groomed horses there because I brush on her. And brushed her from her nose to her toes, picked up, cleaned her feet out, saddled her right up. Again, did not move out of her tracks and stepped right on her and could ride this filly around one-handed, Miss Rose. Could ride her around one-handed because of the things that we had done on the ground in all the rounds prior to. I could just pick her up left-handed or right-handed, and anybody that didn't know would think she was neck-reining. And so we went out into the pen then and got in front of our judges, stepped off, picked up all 4 feet, never made a bobble as far as picking up all 4 of her feet. Started into the obstacle course. She did every obstacle 100%. The only obstacle that she struggled with her first time was there's a portion where there's 2 cones set up, and you have to lope between the cones. You have to pick up the canter or the lope between the cones. And the first time I asked her through the cones, she struggled a little bit, probably in the first 15 feet of it, but then picked up her lope. So we just went on about our business to the obstacles that were left and available. And I mean, like, she did those so softly, like a broke horse. I mean, she stopped on the bridge, she backed off the bridge. She did things like a broke horse and soft and quiet about it. And then we come back and lope through our cones again. Now this time when we come back to lope through the cones, she understood what I was asking and just stepped right off into it and loped down to the other end. And that other end being your office end where I was bringing her to rest every time. So I had a little bit of a plan on how to get her down there, Right. And we come down and rested. Again, at the end of that, at the end of that obstacle session, you have, if there's any time left over, you can kind of do a freestyle or what have you that's left. And so I brought her in front of the crowd and just did some flag work with her and things like that. That mostly things standing still because I knew that at that point I didn't have a lot of filly left in under me. And so instead of picking a fight with her and doing things like that, I tried my best to show her off at the things that she was good at, standing still right there. And that was the flag work and handling her feet and how she would just drop her head. And I know that you've seen it, and I could just put her head in my lap and me kneel down on the ground and ask for her head in her face and her just stick her little head in her lap. And that tells you no harm was done.
Absolutely.
No harm was done. And that's my thing, is that if we can do this and go through the process in a good way and no harm was done, somebody's got to ride them tomorrow. Somebody's got to take them home tomorrow and go back to work with them. And hopefully we put in a good foundation that anybody could go home and carry on with. You don't want to put in a foundation that he goes home and just takes a bronc rider to ride him,
right.
Or that it takes a hand to ride him. At the end of the day, I want the judges, and they said, at the end of this competition, we want to look and pick out a horse that we could go home and ride tomorrow. And that's how I feel, is that at the end of that day, can you take my filly home and ride her? Right. Can you go back there right now and most anyone go to her and handle her and ride her? And I feel like you could. I feel like you could do that with that filly.
Good job all the way around. And how did you wind up placing?
I ended up placing third.
Okay.
I ended up placing third. Placed first. Let me tell you, I did not stay and watch Sarah's first round, but that night, I think I woke up about 3:30 in the morning and I checked Facebook, and the first thing that popped up on my page was a video of Sarah loping around the round pen on that bay filly, and it was beautiful. Mm-hmm. It was beautiful, and this is like 3:30 in the morning. I said, "There's your winner." There wasn't no way to beat that, you know.
Yeah.
And so that little horse and Sarah together as a team was just miles ahead of everything else. So there wasn't any way to beat that. And then Jeff Cox placed second, and I placed third.
Well, I think you did an outstanding job, and I know people have enjoyed watching this round and listening to you explain, you know, the way that you got her to this point, because I think all of it was really good, sound advice. And we'll have another expo in October, so hopefully you'll feel like it and get a chance to come.
Oh, shoot, I like it. If the Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be there.
All right, that sounds great, Johnny. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Miss Rose, and thank you for all that y'all do.
Thank you. And thank you guys out there for watching.
Our souls wander in similar places. Even though we may not know each other, we touch the same wind, we walk under the same sky, and our hearts wander in the same dreams. We are one, women just like you and me. Our show explores women in the horse industry as they share their dreams, challenges, successes. What drives these women? Well, let's find out.